In today's biased news, a horrific discovery in Mexico, Ukraine wants nukes, and Russian scientists go on trial for treason. Ukraine's Zelensky has yet again pressed for NATO membership at a meeting of European leaders in Moldova this Thursday. Understanding the low likelihood of NATO accession, Ukraine has also requested some form of security guarantees by NATO's Vilnius summit in July, ahead of the country's much-anticipated counteroffensive in the east. Tensions between NATO members are palpable as American long-term guarantees clash with German and French preferences for vague support, without concrete statements on the possibility of Ukraine as a NATO member. Zelensky further reiterated his desire for Western fighter jets and Patriot missile defense systems, both of which various Western countries, including the US, have been reluctant to guarantee. NATO's chief Stoltenberg concretely stated that, quote, NATO allies agree that Ukraine will become a member, although Germany and Luxembourg stressed the risks of rushing the process, while Hungary stated that Ukraine's NATO accession would not be on the agenda at the upcoming summit. Luxembourg further warned that NATO's Mutual Assistance Clause would mean the alliance would immediately enter the war with Russia should it accept Ukraine as a member during an ongoing conflict. In a rare moment of honesty, the Secretary General also stated that the most important thing for NATO is to ensure that Ukraine wins the war, but that NATO should not directly take part in the fighting. Likewise, the NATO chief admitted to greater geopolitical interest of supporting Ukraine, in that a Russian victory would make NATO vulnerable. To build on this sharpening rhetoric, the official webpage of the Ukrainian presidency has posted a petition calling for the drafting of a bill to provide Kyiv with access to NATO's arsenal of tactical nuclear weapons within 5 years. Compared to talks at NATO summits, this is a far less serious attempt, but nonetheless, it reflects certain desires of the Ukrainian leadership. Meanwhile, the US has been attempting to accelerate Sweden's accession into NATO by strong-arming Turkey into supporting the motion. Otherwise, American fighter jets will not be supplied to the country, which is home to NATO's second-largest army. The US Senate, avoiding a potential default, has passed bipartisan legislation to raise the government's debt ceiling. The bill was approved with a vote of 63 to 36. The Treasury Department had warned that it would be unable to pay its bills by June 5th without congressional action. The legislation suspends the federal borrowing limit until January 1st, 2025. This is the 103rd time since 1945. For the best economic system in history, it sure seems like capitalism always needs emergency help to keep from imploding. Elon Musk has completed a brief trip to China, where he attended meetings with government officials. Other US executives, including JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, have recently visited the country as well, signaling interest in China's developing markets. This is a stark contrast to the endless clickbait speculation about China's economy always being on the brink of failure. In Ukraine war news, China's Ukraine envoy has appealed to all involved nations to stop their so-called lethal aid and hold peace talks. Quote, China believes that if we really want to put an end to war, to save lives and realize peace, it is important for us to stop sending weapons to the battlefield, or else the tensions will only spiral. End quote. Though it is predictable, it's disappointing that violence is always the first option, and hopefully calls for peace will eventually win out. In Palestine, a toddler has been seriously wounded and his father injured after being shot by the Israeli army in the occupied West Bank. The 40-year-old man was taken to a hospital in Ramallah, while his son was ferried to Israel's Sheba hospital by helicopter. These are just the latest in an endless series of crimes by the illegal military occupation. In Russia, Anatoly Maslov, a prominent Russian scientist involved in the country's hypersonic missile program, has gone on trial for state treason. The trial is closed to the media and public, and is marked as top secret. The exact charges are unclear, but people familiar with the matter suspect it has something to do with possibly passing information to China. Horror in Mexico. At least 45 bags with human remains have been found in a ravine in the western Mexican state of Jalisco during a search for missing people last week. The gruesome discovery was made at the bottom of a 40-meter ravine in a large industrial hub. Forensic experts have yet to determine the number of victims contained in the bags, or their identities. In Senegal, 9 people were killed in protests that erupted following the sentencing of opposition leader and government critic Ousmane Sonko. The Senegalese court sentenced Sonko to 2 years in prison on charges of corrupting youth, but acquitted him of rape charges. Supporters took to the streets, throwing rocks at riot police and setting buses on fire. This led to clashes with the police, who used tear gas to disperse the crowds. The situation remains tense, and it's unclear if the verdict will disqualify Sonko from running in the next election. And in positive news of the day, we can kind of afford more food now. The United Nations Food Agency's World Price Index fell in May to its lowest point in 2 years, as a drop in prices of vegetable oils, cereals, and dairy outweighed increases for sugar and meat. The May score marked the lowest since April 2021, and means the index is now 22% below an all-time peak reached in March 2022, following COVID and the Ukraine war. That's all for today. We'll be back on Monday with more news. If you'd like to see episodes with more in-depth analysis, consider supporting the show on Patreon so we can grow and expand.